covering that breaking news today, the release of a redacted version of the Mueller report. Special counsel Robert Mueller's findings from his 22-month-long investigation. If you're just joining us, we've been here a long time, and we've been searching through 400-plus pages of the investigation into obstruction of justice and conspiracy. And some of what we're learning about the president's conduct in office is, simply put, stunning. Just as stunning, perhaps, the way the day started with a Trumpian-style spin. The president's hand-picked attorney general, who was confirmed just weeks before Robert Mueller's investigation ended, took to the DOJ briefing room and stressed at least 5 times that there was no collusion.
The special counsel found no collusion by any Americans in IRA's illegal activities. There was no evidence of the Trump campaign collusion with the Russian government's hacking. The special counsel confirmed that the Russian government sponsored efforts to illegally interfere with the 2016 presidential election, but did not find that the Trump campaign or other Americans colluded in those efforts. No underlying collusion with Russia. There was, in fact, no collusion.
We showed you that for a reason. It's no coincidence that Donald Trump usually utters the no collusion refrain from his Twitter feed each morning upon waking. It took over an hour after Barr finished that press conference for the Justice Department to publicly release the redacted Mueller report, which never uses the term no collusion in it at all, except when quoting the president and his allies. Also not included in the Mueller report, the phrase total and complete exoneration on collusion or obstruction. In fact, on obstruction, Mueller detailed a long list of what he calls obstructive actions that together make a case against the president on obstruction that, according to Mueller, lays out new details and new obstruction flashpoints that we're learning about for the first time, as well as actions that confirm reports from the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC News, and others, reports that Trump vehemently denied and even smeared as fake news at the time. And while the report also states that there wasn't enough evidence to charge Trump on obstruction or Trump and his campaign with any crimes related to Russian interference, it lays out a worrying pattern of contact with Russians and lies about those contacts that are raising serious concerns today about whether, in the face of clear-cut evidence of the Russian operation to aid Trump, anything would be different if that effort commenced anew or were ongoing. As our friend Jeremy Bash said on our air earlier today, the Mueller investigation may have concluded, but now the attention and the action shifts to Capitol Hill, where House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler has just confirmed he will subpoena all of the underlying evidence behind the Mueller report. Already, the calls have come in from Capitol Hill for Mueller to testify in public to explain his findings and his conclusions. Here to help us sift through today's fireworks and to help me through the hours, since I've been talking for 5 hours, some of our favorite reporters and friends: former U.S. Attorney Chuck Rosenberg, former Assistant Director for Counterintelligence at the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi, Mike Schmidt, Washington correspondent for the New York Times, with us at the table, Matt Miller, a former chief spokesman at the Department of Justice, and Associated Press White House reporter Jonathan Lemire. Let me start with you, Mike Schmidt. Your reporting and that of your counterparts at the Washington Post, NBC News, other outlets heavily cited, especially in the obstruction section. What did you learn today in the release of the Mueller report that bolsters some of the reporting that you and your colleagues have done around the question and the investigation into whether the president obstructed justice?
Well, the thing that the report really does is it takes us into this period of time in 2017 between when Mueller was appointed in May and the rest of that summer, and all of these different things Trump was doing to try and get a hold of the investigation. The most revealing thing to me was an anecdote and some details about how Corey Lewandowski, the president's campaign manager, the president tried to use him to pressure Jeff Sessions to help clear his name. Now, if you remember, Corey Lewandowski has never worked in the Trump administration. So the president was turning to someone outside of the government who he thought may be loyal to him and could help continue to pressure Sessions, who the president was going after publicly, who he was asking privately to get him to unrecuse, who the president was holding over him a resignation letter that Sessions had given him. And here's Corey Lewandowski, who has gone in and met with Mueller and given up these details and is being used by Mueller to tell the story of obstruction. And if you're the president, you look at that and you think, man, you know, I thought a guy like Corey was very loyal to me, but obviously there he gave up a lot to the investigators.
Well, someone else that the president may or may not have found loyal is Don McGahn, his former White House counsel, who has sort of an instantly famous quote that we've been talking about all day. McGahn was asked to do crazy bleep, reminds with hit, reference Saturday Night Massacre. McGahn's clear recollection was that the president directed him to tell Rosenstein not only that conflicts existed, but also that Mueller has to go. McGahn spoke with the president twice and understood the directive the same way both times. In response to that request, McGahn decided to quit because he did not want to participate in events that he described as akin to the Saturday Night Massacre. He told Priebus, that's Reince Priebus, who was then the White House chief of staff, that the president had asked him to do crazy bleep, rhymes with hit, and informed Priebus and Bannon, that Heilman's giggling, that Bannon that he was leaving. Mike Schmidt, this attempted firing at Robert Mueller, something that you and your colleagues reported on, turned out to be one of the central flashpoints in that obstruction investigation. Talk about what you learned about that today.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is sort of the guardrail that McGahn looks like he was in the report, that the president wanted to do a lot of things, that if the people around him had followed through on them, the president would have created an even bigger problem for himself and maybe even greater legal jeopardy. But here you have someone like Don McGahn, who did not follow through on what the president said when the president said go and get rid of Mueller. At the same time, you have McGahn here, who obviously cooperated extensively with Mueller, and the president's legal team has always claimed that they had a full understanding of everything that McGahn said. But this is something that McGahn talks about here in the report that I don't think they had much of an idea about. It was not something that was in notes. It was just something that McGahn relayed that he hadn't really told many people about. And that is just another thing that I think the president's legal team, which had thought it had a handle on everything that Mueller knew about, my guess is that when they saw the report, they learned some things that they did not know about. And because of their position and because of where the president sits atop the executive branch and the fact that he was under investigation, they could have learned more of these things along the way, but they didn't. And now these things are public and they're potentially politically damaging for the president.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.